You weren't born into some grand legacy. There were no velvet chairs or private tutors. Just a folding board on a worn kitchen table and a secondhand tactics book with someone else's notes in the margins. Your pieces didn't match. Your clock was plastic. But the second you saw how the night moved, something inside you snapped into place. You were still learning how to multiply when you learned how to mate in 4. The others your age didn't get it. They hated losing. You hated not understanding. So you learned. Fast. You devoured old game records like bedtime stories. You weren't reading fantasy books. You were studying brilliancies. Quiet victories by quiet men. The kind of players who wore suits, never spoke during interviews, and dismantled legends without ever cracking a smile. You wanted to be like him, that cold killer from the 80s. The one who made other grandmasters look like amateurs. You'd replay his games on a dusty laptop while your classmates played video games. He made chess look like something divine, flawless, untouchable. But your game wasn't like his. Not really. Yours was faster, sharper, less clean, more blood. You didn't win with perfect theory, you won with chaos. When they zigged, you zagged. You memorized traps instead of textbooks. You saw combinations that weren't supposed to exist and made them real. And still, they didn't take you seriously. The kids in blazers with $200 training software thought you were a gimmick. Too reckless, too emotional. You didn't play proper. You moved too fast. Smirked when you sacked a queen, but you kept winning. You weren't what the Federation wanted, but you were what the board feared. By 13, you were skipping grades and skipping meals, flying across time zones to chase norms. You slept on planes, ate from vending machines. An airport hotel with a cracked mirror was home as long as the Wi-Fi worked and the tournament had good lighting. And every time you sat down across from someone older, higher rated, more connected, you told yourself, he's not better, just richer. You didn't say it out loud, you just proved it again and again. Then came the titles, the invitations, the online buzz. You weren't just talented, you were dangerous. You were climbing fast, but so was he. The other one, the golden boy. He played differently, slower, like the game answered to him. You beat him once in Blitz, then twice. People raised eyebrows. They whispered. Maybe you were the real heir. Maybe the crown wasn't pre-written. You let yourself believe it. You started dreaming not just of winning, but of owning the game. Being the name they'd say 50 years from now. The one kids would study like you studied your idols' games. But then the losses came. Not big, not dramatic, just enough. Enough to remind you that the spotlight wasn't yours. Not really. You got the headlines, you got the bullet games, you got the books, you got the stream, but you didn't care, not yet. Because you were still rising, still proving, still burning off the fumes of childhood ambition, fueled by a promise you made to yourself in a tiny room with mismatched pieces. One day, they'll remember your name too. You weren't supposed to be the face of the game. You weren't the most decorated, not the cleanest. You didn't play the openings that made classical coaches nod in approval. But one day, you turned on a webcam, clicked go live, and something changed. People showed up, not grandmasters, not analysts, people, kids, night owls. Casuals who didn't know what Zugzwang meant, but knew they liked watching you play. You talked during games, laughed when you blundered, trash-talked your chat mid-move, and still flagged titled players on instinct alone. You weren't lecturing, you were living. For the first time, the world saw chess not as an academic torture chamber, but as a living, breathing street fight. And they loved it. The numbers exploded, interviews, sponsors, reaction compilations. You weren't just playing chess anymore, you were creating content. You made people care about the game in a way it hadn't felt in decades. But there was a trade-off. They started calling you a streamer, not a grandmaster, not a contender, a content guy. And every time you saw that word next to your name, something in you twitched. Because you didn't start playing this game for likes. You started because you wanted to be the best. But now your victories came with memes. Your losses came with emoji spam. You were part entertainer, part educator, part punching bag for a world that saw your genius. Only when it was clipped into a 30-second montage. And meanwhile, he stayed in the shadows. Quiet, cold, always prepping. While you were laughing on stream, he was prepping endgame novelties. While you were doing reaction collabs, he was adding another layer to an already perfect shell. You couldn't do both. Not really. Every hour you spent engaging the audience was an hour you weren't sharpening your lines. Your calculations got looser, your prep got rushed. You weren't bad, but you weren't improving. And in this game, if you're not climbing, you're sliding. You told yourself it was worth it. that you were growing the game, that the culture needed this, and it did. But there were nights, silent ones, when the screen was off and the applause faded, and you'd open an old game file. One of the classics, the ones you memorized as a kid, the ones played by that absolute surgeon from the 90s, the one who never smiled, never streamed, and never sold out, and still carved his name into the heart of the game. And you wondered, did I take the wrong path? You had more fans than most world champions ever did. You had reach, influence, a legacy. But not that legacy. Not the kind that gets carved into medals and remembered in final rounds. You were the king of the side game. Faster than anyone, funnier than everyone. But when it came to the crown, you were still on the outside looking in. You've beaten every top player in the world, except one. You've studied him since you were a kid, back when he was still raw, still human. You remember the early tournaments, the videos, the way he'd fidget and stare into the board like it owed him answers. You thought you were right there with him, but then he kept getting better. And you didn't. You were fast. You were sharp. You could feel the board, but he owned it. His moves looked simple until you realized 10 moves later that you'd been slowly strangled. You beat him once in Blitz, then in Bullet, then in some off-format online event with 0 stakes and no prize money. The headline said, "Streamer takes down the king." But that wasn't the full story, because when it counted, when it was slow, quiet, over-the-board classical chess, he crushed you, subtly, clinically, like he'd been waiting years for you to try and catch up. You told yourself the gap wasn't real, that with more prep, more focus, fewer distractions, you could bridge it. But it never shrank. And every time you got close, every time you built a lead or found a novelty, he had an answer. Not just a move, a solution. You were reacting while he was composing. And the worst part? You weren't scared of him. You respected him. You admired him. You'd modeled your positional play after his. Adopted his time management, mirrored his endgame technique. He was the standard, the summit, the reason you kept showing up. And deep down, the reason you started to fall apart. Because you were always one move behind. One wrong evaluation, one slow pawn push, one miscalculated queen trade, and the game would unravel like thread between your fingers. And once it did, there was no getting it back. You weren't losing because you were bad. You were losing because he was inevitable. And the chess world? They noticed. Every time you rose, they pulled out the same stat. Still hasn't beaten him in a major classical event. Still can't break through at the top. You were a champion, just not that kind. You were elite, just not him. And when the public talked about greatness, you were the next line down. The also. The one who might have, but never quite. The silver to his gold, the echo to his voice. And that realization? It doesn't break you all at once. It bleeds you slowly. Until one day, you sit at the board, eyes locked with a mirror of your own past, a younger, hungrier version of yourself across the table, and you think, this is how it starts. Because one day, you were the challenger. Now you're the checkpoint. You're the guy they have to beat before they face the final boss. And you know exactly who that is. You're everywhere now. Tournaments? You're in them. Twitch? You own it. YouTube ? Constant uploads. Your name trends more often than the guys actually winning titles. People see your face and think, he is chess. But they don't say it with reverence. They say it with amusement. Because somewhere along the climb, the brand became louder than the brilliance. You're not introduced as a grandmaster anymore. You're introduced as that chess streamer guy. The one who reacts. The one who plays 10 games at once. The one who makes faces and says pog when a 900 rated player finds mate in 2. You made the game cool again. And somehow that made you less serious. The paradox is hard to swallow. You helped revive an entire sport. Dragged it from dusty corners and smug commentary booths into living rooms, schools, Discord servers. You gave it edge, emotion, life. But the more they watched you laugh, the more they forgot how hard you used to fight. How deep your prep was. How sharp your instincts still are. They don't see the hours of study, the notebooks, the databases, the games played with a headache and 2 hours of sleep. They just see the overlay, the camera, the smile, the clip. They say you entertain now, as if that's all you do. You try to brush it off, play the part, say it's fine, that titles don't matter, that ratings don't define you. But late at night, when the stream is off and the phone is dark, you open one of his games. The other guy, the world champion, he's not online, not memeing, not juggling content and competition. He's just winning, quietly, Like the greats you grew up watching. You used to want to be them. Now you wonder if you ever even could have been. Because somewhere along the way, you made a choice. Or maybe the world made it for you. You became the face. But not the force. The engine of popularity, not the architect of victory. And it eats at you. Every time a commentator says you're dangerous but inconsistent. Every time a tweet goes viral with a joke from your stream. But the next day's tournament recap doesn't even mention your name. You beat someone big? It's a fluke. You lose? It's validation. You win 3 in a row? It's online. You lose one? He's washed. You live in a hall of mirrors now. One version of you wins blitz games with half a second left and 100,000 people cheering. The other version sits in silence, facing down an opponent who studied for 6 months just to target your weak lines, and does. And when you lose, it's content. When you win, it's an exception. That's your legacy now. Not the perfect game, but the perfect moment. And as much as you tell yourself that's enough, deep down, you still hear that kid voice. The one from the kitchen table, holding the mismatched pieces, whispering, you were supposed to be more than this. The games blur now. You remember fragments. A pawn break in round 6. A queen sacrifice that almost worked. The way your heart sped up when the clock hit 30 seconds, you still have it. That spark. The instinct. The engine between your ears. But something's different. Not broken, just tired. You still show up, you still prepare. You still compete. But that fire, that sharp, hungry burn that used to keep you up at night, it's quieter now. Faint. Like a memory you don't want to let go of. But know you already have. You watch the next generation coming up, clicking fast, calculating deeper, not better, just newer. They've got teams, backers, the system you never had. They're polished, coached from age 5, trained to be killers. You weren't trained, you fought. You clawed your way through chaos, through missed flights, through tournament invites that came with strings and politics and pressure, through being the wild one, the loud one, the one who wouldn't sit still or shut up or blend in. You thought it would all be worth it. That one day the headline would match the grind. But that day never came. You were number 2, maybe number 5, maybe in the mix. You had your moments, brilliant, unforgettable moments, but the title never followed. And in this world, moments fade. Medals don't. People say you changed the game. They mean it as a compliment. But deep down, it hurts. Because you didn't want to change the game. You wanted to conquer it. You didn't want to be remembered for your personality. You wanted to be remembered for your precision, your patience, your pressure. The kind of games that get studied, not just clipped. You open your old files sometimes. The ones with annotations, notes scribbled like prayers, lines that only made sense to you. You see the evolution. From fearless kid to fierce competitor to frustrated veteran, you smile. But it's a tired smile. Because you know now, the crown was never meant for you. It was carved before you arrived. And even though you played perfect, pushed past the limit, sacrificed everything, burned for it, you still lost. Not the match, the dream. The dream that if you just worked harder, if you just kept showing up, if you just believed long enough, you'd get to hold that trophy too. But some players aren't built to win it all. Some players are built to carry the game forward, to keep the flame alive, to remind the world what love for the game looks like, even if it doesn't love you back. And maybe that's your legacy. Not the crown, but the climb, not the victory, but the volume of people watching you try. That's why it sucks to be a chess player.